The personnel shuttle shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and Elena Carter pressed her face to the small viewport, her brown eyes wide. Outside, the War Beast Taming Academy station unfurled as a colossal metal ring clasping half of a gray moon. Bands of blue light ran along the station's spine, linking dorms, classrooms, and War Beast pens like glowing veins. Elena Carter swallowed hard, rubbing her sweaty palms on her pants as she thought of the dusty Earth farm she had just left behind. She was used to the smell of soil, livestock sweat, and animal calls, not recycled metal and sterile air filters. The overhead speakers crackled as an automated voice announced that the shuttle was preparing to dock with Vanguard War Beast Academy. As the shuttle latched onto the reception bay, Elena Carter felt a small jolt and heard metal locks engage like a door slamming shut behind her. She stepped into the station corridor with the mixed crowd of beings, surrounded by the sounds of boots, claws, tentacles, and glide wheels. To her left, a massive holographic statue of a four-legged war beast roared with bared fangs, hanging over the welcome hall. The info panel beneath the hologram explained that it was only a scaled projection, and that real war beasts were much larger. Elena Carter turned away with mingled excitement and unease as she was herded toward the biometric screening area for new cadets. The line shuffled toward an arch-shaped scanner where blue light swept over each being and chimed its approval. When her turn came, Elena Carter took a deep breath, stepped beneath the metal arch, and lifted her chin as the automated instructions requested. Blue light swept from head to toe over Elena Carter. Then the scanner suddenly jolted and shrieked in a rapid, piercing series of beeps. The display beside the gate flipped to red, flashing the text. Type: Human Earthborn. Classification: Invalid in database.
What's happening?
The recruits behind Elena Carter immediately stalled, whispers flaring in a dozen languages she couldn't understand. A staffer in gray-blue uniform halted the system and hurriedly tapped an internal comm,
What is she doing?
his eyes never leaving Elena Carter. Minutes later, Director Kalis Rowan arrived, tall and lean in official robes, his steely gray eyes sweeping over Elena Carter. Name, species, homeworld, Director Kalis Rowan said in a tone weary from routine, though his eyes stayed locked on the red words, Human Earthborn. Elena Carter, Human, Earth, she answered, her throat suddenly dry as she pronounced the name of her planet.
I know my duty.
Director Kalis Rowan glanced at the display, his brows knitting as the note, Observed World, No Contact, appeared beneath the name Earth. Elena Carter saw only blinking red and blue icons, but she could still read the wariness settling over Director Kalis Rowan's expression. After a few strained seconds, Director Kalis Rowan sighed, signed the digital approval panel, and affixed a yellow warning, icon to Elena Carter's file.
Proceed with
Provisional
caution.
admittance with risk review, Director Kalis Rowan said, then gestured for Elena Carter to follow an administrative aide. Elena Carter walked in silence, ears still ringing with the error beeps, as if the academy itself were unsure whether to let her in. By the end of intake, Elena Carter was folded into a tour group of recruits for a quick sweep of the facilities, from lecture halls to the War Beast pens. As the group passed a thick viewing window over the primary War Beast pens, Elena Carter heard a low, thunderous roar rising from far below. The other recruits instinctively edged back, but Elena Carter unconsciously stepped closer, trying to catch the rhythm of that roar. The guide hurried the group along, but in Elena Carter's chest, the roar kept echoing like a bull's bellow across a field before a storm. At the rest stop, when the recruits were allowed a few minutes to wander, Elena Carter noticed a lesser-used side corridor slanting downward. Driven by her stubborn curiosity, Elena Carter slipped away from the group, following pale yellow warning placards toward the containment pens. At the end of the passage, Elena Carter stopped before a small observation room where a massive window looked into a solitary pen, reinforced to a frightening degree. Inside the pen, a colossal four-legged creature with scales black as volcanic rock lay coiled, surrounded by bands of energy chains and softly glowing containment pylons. The lettering along the window frame spelled out its name, Titan Fang, Class, Extreme Hazard, Non-Tameable. Titan Fang stirred, scales rasping like rolling stones, then slowly raised its head, glowing amber eyes locking onto Elena Carter as if it had smelled her from afar. Instead of roaring in frenzy as she expected, Titan Fang merely stared, its breathing slow and steady, as if weighing whether Elena Carter was a threat or something else. Elena Carter unconsciously dropped her shoulders and angled her body, mimicking the old instinct she once used to calm a maddened bull in a cramped stall. Titan Fang blinked once, then unexpectedly stretched out and lay down, its head settling at Elena Carter's eye level as the wall sensors flickered wildly. In the ceiling above the observation room, a cluster of cameras whirred, sending footage of the calmed Titan Fang and the motionless Elena Carter to the main training control. In the control room, Commander Therion Vale stood before a bank of screens, the tail of his long coat flicking as he watched Titan Fang lying docile. "An untamable war beast lying down for a human recruit," Commander Therion Vale muttered, his hand tightening on the railing. He opened an internal channel, crisply ordering security to the scene at once and instructing them to keep Elena Carter in place until command arrived. Down in the observation room, Elena Carter barely had time to notice the rear door open as two armed security officers stepped in, signaling for her to back away from the glass. She pulled her hand back, heart pounding, yet still glanced at Titan Fang one last time as the colossal creature simply blinked calmly, apparently unbothered by the weapons. The first morning at the War Beast Taming Academy began with a sharp assembly klaxon echoing through the corridors, just as Elena Carter had started to learn her way around. Elena Carter yanked her black-gray uniform jacket into place, straightened the rookie insignia on her shoulder, and jogged after the flow of bodies toward the main training wing. The archway doors opened to reveal a vast hangar where the training floor was divided into pens, each containing a war beast with different bones, hides, and scales that made Elena Carter swallow hard. Commander Therion Vale stood in the middle of the training floor, his long coat stirring in the conditioned breeze, as his cool eyes watched Elena Carter and the other recruits enter. "Welcome to Basic Taming 1, Commander Therion Vale said, his even voice carrying enough weight to make Elena Carter stand straighter than usual. To Elena Carter's right, Lysandra Cade stood with arms folded, silver hair tied high, and a collar bearing her warrior family crest glinting under the lights. On her left, Corvin Astor gave his dark-feathered wings a small shake, tucking them neatly behind his back, while sneaking curious glances at Elena Carter. Commander Therion Vale let his gaze sweep over each face, then pointed toward the nearest row of pens where low-tier war beasts hissed softly behind energy rails. "Today, cadets, you will practice forming your first bond with a low-tier war beast," Commander Therion Vale said, making Elena Carter's heart skip a beat. A tech assistant wheeled over a cart of neural harness sets, handing Elena Carter a unit that fit her hands along with a basic command slate. Elena Carter skimmed the unfamiliar symbols on the command slate, trying to memorize the prescribed sequence, even as her mind still reeled from last night's glimpse of Titan Fang. Commander Therion Vale assigned Lysandra Cade to a sleek, naturally armored war beast that clearly already knew her scent. Lysandra Cade strode up and clipped the neural leads to her war beast's collar with smooth motions, reciting the calming commands like a song she knew by heart. "Standard model," Commander Therion Vale remarked dryly, noting something on his datapad, while Elena Carter felt a little dizzy at how effortless it looked. When his turn came, Corvin Astor was paired with a semi-aerial war beast, whose thin leather wings fanned gusts that whipped Elena Carter's hair around. Corvin Astor fumbled with the harness, dodging a testing peck, while forcing a confident smile that Elena Carter could clearly see trembling. When it was Elena Carter's turn, Commander Therion Vale signaled an aide to open a pen at the end of the row, where a mid-sized war beast was thumping its tail irritably against the floor. "This one's flagged as uncooperative, prone to breaking harnesses," the aide reported. And Elena Carter felt Commander Therion Vale's gaze flick briefly her way, as if this were a test. Elena Carter drew a deep breath, stepped past the safety rail into the interaction zone, neural harness in hand, and palms damp with sweat. The war beast lifted its head, its lazy yellow eyes sliding over Elena Carter before it flared its cheeks with a low growl, claws rasping lightly on the metal floor. Elena Carter remembered her father's warning to never stare straight into a bull's eyes when it's wound up. and she let her gaze shift gently to the war beast's shoulder. She dropped her shoulders, eased her knees, and walked at half pace, leaving just enough space in case the war beast lunged like the panicked horses on her old farm. The standard commands on the slate seemed to recede, and Elena Carter replaced them with a low, steady voice, murmuring meaningless earth words the way she once soothed calves. The war beast tilted its head, its growl dwindling as its tail stopped jerking, then slowly took one step closer to Elena Carter, sniffing the air around her. Elena Carter raised her hand slowly, holding it still so the war beast could initiate contact, feeling its hot breath wash over her skin and send a shiver through her. When the war beast showed no sign of aggression, Elena Carter gently slipped the neural harness around its neck, careful as if she were bridling a young horse. The nearby control panel pinged, showing primary link established, far faster than for the other cadets, making Elena Carter jump slightly. From a distance, Commander Therian Vale frowned, comparing Elena Carter's link time on his data board to the others, and finding the difference disturbingly large. "Carter, repeat with a backup specimen," Commander Therian Vale ordered, his voice neutral, though Elena Carter felt the pressure closing in on her. Another pen slid open, revealing a shaggy war beast with wary red eyes that had clearly fought past training attempts, making Elena Carter tilt her head in assessment. This time, Elena Carter ignored the command slate and instead watched its breathing rhythm, muscle tension, and tail flicks, adjusting her distance accordingly, as if reading an invisible language. A few nearby cadets nudged each other, pointing at how Elena Carter approached without reading commands, while Lysandra Cade watched intently with a mix of irritation and curiosity. The second war beast likewise calmed, lowering its head to let Elena Carter touch its brow and fasten the neural harness without a single violent jerk, as its file had warned. Above, a darkened observation room lit up, revealing Professor Mira Caldwell leaning on the railing, her eyes fixed on the displays showing the brainwave patterns of both Elena Carter and the war beasts. Professor Mira Caldwell frowned as the graph segments tied to pattern recognition and cross-species empathy in Elena Carter's brain lit up with abnormal intensity. Commander Therian Vale glanced up at the dark reflective glass, knowing Professor Mira Caldwell was watching, then turned back to view Elena Carter as a new, strategic equation. Once the exercise ended, Commander Therian Vale dismissed the other groups for a break, but kept Elena Carter by the pen to question her further. "Carter, have you trained war beasts before?" Commander Therian Vale asked, his tone sharp as a blade, and Elena Carter shook her head. "I've only worked with cows, horses, and a few stubborn farm animals," Elena Carter answered, feeling the words sound absurd amid the distant roars. Commander Therian Vale was silent for a moment, then opened an internal channel, requesting that Elena Carter's training data be sent directly to Professor Mira Caldwell's research archive. Lysandra Cade leaned against a nearby railing, pretending to adjust her gloves while actually listening to every word between Commander Therian Vale and Elena Carter. Corvin Astor appeared beside Lysandra Cade, folding his wings tight to avoid blocking the way, and whispering that the human had just broken the class record, so rumors were guaranteed.
Are you seeing this?
"Rumors are already here,"
Corvin,
Lysandra Cade replied, her gaze never leaving Elena Carter, her voice much colder than her calm expression. In the observation room, Professor Mira Caldwell saved the entire data set, tagging it Human Taming Pattern beside Elena Carter's name and flagging a request for detailed neural screening. When training finally ended, Elena Carter left the hangar with her hands still feeling as if fur, hide, and war beast breath clung to her skin. She didn't know that far below, in the deepest containment tier, sensors around Titanfang's pen had just recorded the ancient beast's heartbeat, fluctuating oddly at the exact moment Elena Carter touched her first war beast. The next morning, Elena Carter was summoned urgently to the Central Administrative Sector before training hours, making her feel like she was being dragged out of a pen for inspection. The meeting room door slid open to reveal Director Kalis Rowan, Commander Therian Vale, and Professor Mira Caldwell, already seated around a circular holotable. "Sit down, Cadet Carter," Director Kalis Rowan said, in a low but not entirely hostile voice, gesturing her to a seat. Elena Carter sat, trying to keep her back straight as her eyes skimmed the floating battle maps, brainwave graphs, and training footage above the table. Professor Mira Caldwell tapped the controls, pulling up footage of Elena Carter taming 2 low-tier war beasts from the previous day. On the display, Elena Carter saw herself lowering her body, offering her hand, and letting the war beast initiate contact, looking more like a barn scene than a military drill. This approach pattern does not exist in our curriculum, Professor Mira Caldwell said, her eyes never leaving Elena Carter's image on the holo. Commander Therion Vale folded his arms and leaned back in his chair, his voice dry. But it's 3 times more effective than standard. Director Kalis Rowan flipped the holo to another panel, displaying Titanfang's schematics with the annotation, non-tameable. And this is Titanfang lying down for Cadet Carter without a command, Director Kalis Rowan said, bringing up the observation footage. Elena Carter swallowed as she watched Titanfang on the holo turn its head to look straight at her, exactly as she'd felt that day, and had hoped was her imagination. "Can you explain this, Cadet Carter?" Director Kalis Rowan asked, his tone courteous, but backed by a massive weight of responsibility. "I am not sure," Elena Carter admitted, her hands unconsciously tightening together on her lap. "I just read their reactions, like reading cows or horses," Elena Carter added, hearing herself and feeling ridiculous. Professor Mira Caldwell tapped the console, overlaying data on Earth's livestock domestication history beside the war beast profiles. Cadet Carter's behavior fits pre-mechanization human domestication patterns, Professor Mira Caldwell said, her tone a mix of excitement and unease. Commander Therion Vale glanced at Director Kalis Rowan, which means we're sitting with an unregistered strategic asset. Before Elena Carter could ask what asset meant, the meeting room door slid open, and a man in a silver diplomatic suit entered with a courteous smile. Advisor Lucian Maris, Strategic Council Envoy, Director Kalis Rowan introduced, his gaze turning suddenly more guarded. Advisor Lucian Maris pulled out a chair and sat with the ease of someone used to tables that decided the life and death of worlds. "I've reviewed the Titanfang reports and Cadet Elena Carter's initial training sessions," Advisor Lucian Maris said, his pale blue eyes skimming over her like an equation. Elena Carter felt the back of her neck go cold as she realized that in Advisor Lucian Maris's eyes, she was not a person, but a useful data line. A species that can tame war beasts faster than standard and affect a non-tameable specimen, Advisor Lucian Maris continued, is something the Council cannot ignore. Director Kalis Rowan laced his fingers. "This is still an academy, not a military testing platform." Commander Therion Vale didn't immediately object. He simply said, "Until war requires what an academy can provide. I'm merely requesting additional oversight rights regarding Cadet Elena Carter," Advisor Lucian Maris said smoothly, "and access to any advanced evaluations involving Titanfang." Elena Carter sat still, feeling as if her name was being written into a contract she hadn't been allowed to read. At last, Director Kalis Rowan sighed. "We'll discuss an oversight framework, but any changes to Cadet Elena Carter's training schedule will go through me." Advisor Lucian Maris nodded, as if that had been his plan all along, while Elena Carter could only clench her hands tighter to keep from shaking.
Did you see her?
News of the closed-door meeting spread faster than any official announcement, and by mealtime, the entire mess hall was buzzing about the human cadet taming Titanfang. Elena Carter sat down with her tray, only to realize that every table seemed to have at least one pair of eyes, sneaking looks her way. Corvin Astor appeared with a tray and sat down opposite Elena Carter without asking, as if this seat were predestined. "This whole floor is betting on when Advisor Lucian Maris will pull you out of the academy," Corvin Astor said, mixing his food with a wry smile. "Nice to know I'm gambling material," Elena Carter replied, her voice more bitter than she intended. And Corvin Astor laughed. Lysandra Cade appeared beside the table, setting her tray down with enough force to make the water in Elena Carter's cup ripple. "If Cadet Elena Carter can tame Titanfang, I want to see whether it's real skill or just a lucky accident," Lysandra Cade said, enunciating each word. Elena Carter set her spoon down, feeling the entire mess hall turn into an arena she had never signed up for. "What do you want, Lysandra?"
The room
Elena
faded
Carter
into
asked,
silence
trying to
around
keep her
me.
voice calm even as her heart hammered.
Don't
"A
question
formal
my
sparring
resolve,
session in the
Lysandra.
training bay," Lysandra Cade replied. "Same type of war beast,
never
same
do, Elena.
conditions. To see who truly understands them better."
I challenge
Corvin
you to a
Astor let out a
one-on-one
low
combat
whistle.
simulation
"This
in the
isn't
training
betting
room.
anymore.
I
This is an
accept.
event." By day's end, Lysandra Cade's challenge had reached Commander Therian Vale, and he approved it on the condition that Director Kalis Rowan, Professor Mira Caldwell, and Advisor Lucian Maris observe. The next morning, Elena Carter entered the main training hangar to a low buzz of anticipation, feeling as if each of her steps was being weighed by hundreds of eyes. On a temporary viewing platform, Director Kalis Rowan sat in the middle row, flanked by Professor Mira Caldwell with a control board, and Advisor Lucian Maris wearing an unreadable expression. Commander Therian Vale stood at the center of the floor, pointing to two identical pens where mid-tier war beasts paced in circles, eyes glinting warily. "Same species, same aggression rating, no prior bonds with any cadet," Commander Therian Vale explained, looking from Elena Carter to Lysandra Cade in turn. Lysandra Cade walked toward the left pen, with the practiced gait of someone used to admiring eyes. Elena Carter moved toward the right pen, her steps lighter, but each heartbeat heavy as lead, as she thought of Titanfang lying somewhere still beneath her feet. At the signal, Lysandra Cade and Elena Carter stepped into their respective interaction zones at the same time, neural harnesses ready in their hands. Lysandra Cade began reciting the standard command chain in a clear, measured voice, while Elena Carter opted for silence, answering each twitch of her war beast with her eyes and body alone. On the platform, Professor Mira Caldwell watched the graphs, seeing Lysandra Cade's neural pattern follow textbook stability, while Elena Carter's oscillated in a strange synchrony with her war beast. Advisor Lucian Maris tilted his head, eyes sharp as blades as he watched that synchronization, clearly already calculating how to use it. On the floor, Lysandra Cade's war beast obediently knelt on command, but its ears twitched constantly, tail rigid, and eyes glittering with vigilance. Elena Carter's war beast, meanwhile, lowered its body slowly without a word, even tilting its head slightly toward her, as if waiting for her next cue. Commander Therian Vale ordered both cadets to initiate the synchronized movement drill, guiding their war beasts through a series of battlefield-style obstacles. Lysandra Cade issued crisp commands, pulling her war beast through each obstacle with officer-like precision, though every maneuver required firm emphasis. Elena Carter moved as if leading a stubborn bull through a narrow path, sometimes stepping ahead, sometimes backing up to open space, and her war beast adjusted its gait to match. At a tight turn, Lysandra Cade's war beast hesitated for half a second, needing an extra command to commit to the new direction and slowing their overall time. Elena Carter's war beast, however, turned smoothly into the exact space she'd opened with a single backward step, as if it had learned to read her mind in minutes. When the drill ended, both war beasts had cleared the course, but the overhead graph showed significantly lower physiological stress in the beast beside Elena Carter. Results, Professor Mira Caldwell's voice came over the speakers, indicate both cadets meet standards, but Cadet Elena Carter produces a significantly less stressful bond for the war beast. Another wave of whispers rippled across the floor, and Elena Carter felt that every murmur carried the word human as a hanging question mark. On the platform, Advisor Lucian Maris leaned toward Director Kalis Rowan. "Your academy has just demonstrated that humans possess their own war beast taming doctrine. And that means the Strategic Council will not permit Elena Carter to remain just a normal cadet," Advisor Lucian Maris added, his smile as thin as a blade. Director Kalis Rowan didn't reply, but his shoulders tightened slightly, as though bracing for a war to be fought not on battlefields, but in paperwork and resolutions. 3 days after the sparring session, Elena Carter was summoned to the tactical room, where Commander Therian Vale waited with a rotating three-dimensional terrain map hanging in the air. "This is Training Moon Epsilon 4, Commander Therian Vale said, pointing at ridges and valleys on the holo, where second-year cadets run field exercises with war beasts. Elena Carter swallowed as small red dots appeared. symbols for semi-feral war beasts seated across the surface. "Tomorrow, you'll join a small team down there for your first field run," Commander Therion Vale continued, his gaze
Carter.
resting on Elena Carter's name on the roster. The team consisted of Elena Carter, Lysandra Cade, Corvin Astor, and 2 other cadets, Joran Malik and Nivea Solas. Joran Malik was a massive humanoid with dark skin and a sensor-studded chestplate, while Nivea Solas was an aquatic alien in a transparent environmental suit filled with pale blue fluid. Mission: survey, sample collection, and evaluation of semi-feral war beast responses to mixed cadet teams, Commander Therion Vale said, throwing a particular look at Elena Carter as he emphasized responses. That night, Elena Carter lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, her head full of Titanfang's image and the red dots on the moon holo. She wondered whether her farm instincts would still be useful once she stepped into a world without railings and glass walls. The next morning, Elena Carter tugged on her light field armor, sealing the clasps, her hand brushing the neural harness at her hip like a new habit she hadn't yet grown used to. At the launch bay, a small shuttle waited, its belly open to reveal a compartment just large enough for 5 cadets and their 5 paired war beasts. Elena Carter stroked along her war beast's neck before leading it up the ramp, murmuring meaningless words whose tone nevertheless made the creature's shoulders loosen. Lysandra Cade watched the scene without speaking, yet Elena Carter could still feel her cold gaze, like a reminder of the duel. As the shuttle detached from the station, Epsilon 4 emerged below like a cracked stone sphere, dark forest patches and bands of mist curling around its valleys. Elena Carter pressed her face to the viewport, feeling the same awe as when she first saw the Academy station, only this time, the ground below had no safe sky overhead. The shuttle touched down on a flat rock pad, fine dust billowing around its struts before the air scrubbers cleared it in seconds. When the hatch opened, Elena Carter stepped onto Epsilon 4's surface, her boots crunching on loose rock while her war beast sniffed eagerly at the unfamiliar air. Corvin Astor spread his wings to test the wind, grimacing at the thin air, while Nivea Solas adjusted the valves on her liquid suit accordingly. Joran Malik pulled the squad together, his deep voice booming over comms. "Maintain distance from local war beasts. Interact only on command." They moved into a sparse forest where native trees twisted with leaves like second skins, while the sensors on the war beasts' collars streamed data back to the station. From orbit, the Academy control room glowed like an illuminated anthill, where Commander Therion Vale and Professor Mira Caldwell tracked the team's every movement. "Heart rate stable, stress levels within parameters," Professor Mira Caldwell reported, her eyes skimming the graphs bearing each cadet's name, including Elena Carter. "Good," Commander Therion Vale replied, though his gaze lingered longer on the signal icons for Elena Carter and her assigned war beast. On the ground, the team halted in a shallow basin where an abandoned survey outpost from a private mining firm loomed, all rusted metal plates and toppled antenna towers. "This sector was supposed to be cleared," Lysandra Cade said, double-checking the data on her wrist console, while Elena Carter felt a chill run down her back. Corvin Astor took a low flight, gliding once over the station roof and reporting over comms. "I see fresh claw marks on the walls, not from low-tier war beasts." Joran Malik signaled the group to tighten formation, while Elena Carter's war beast snorted and changed its stride, as if scenting something strange. Suddenly, a shrill screech rose from deep within the station, followed by a tremor that made loose stones shiver under Elena Carter's boots. An old flooring panel suddenly collapsed, sending dust and metal flying to reveal a deep pit where the red lights of an ancient war beast containment system flickered in the basement below. From that darkness, a massive creature hauled itself up, long body plated in cracked armor, eyes blazing red, and an outdated control collar on its neck, sparking fitfully. "Feral Alpha," Joran Malik exhaled, switching his armor to combat mode, as Lysandra Cade immediately compiled a textbook retreat command. Elena Carter stared at the Alpha, recognizing the jerky headshakes and staggering steps of an animal driven mad by pain rather than hunger, like a trapped bull. "Don't call orbital fire!" Elena Carter shouted into the comm, her heart leaping into her throat as she saw Lysandra Cade about to send a distress ping. "It'll wipe out the entire semi-feral cluster here," Elena Carter said quickly, her eyes never leaving the Alpha thrashing at the device around its neck. In orbit, Commander Therion Vale heard Elena Carter's words over the speakers, his hand hovering over the fire authorization, while his eyes slid to Professor Mira Caldwell, who was glued to the Alpha's physiological readouts. Its control unit is throwing constant error signals, Professor Mira Caldwell said quickly. Pain indicators off the chart. Commander Therion Vale clenched his teeth slightly, then spoke into the channel. Cadet Elena Carter, you have 15 seconds to prove it can be controlled by other means. On the ground, Elena Carter let her weapon drop at her feet, raising both hands as she walked slowly toward the snarling Alpha, ignoring Nivea Solis yelling that she was insane. Joran, keep everyone back. Don't close the circle, Elena Carter said, her eyes fixed on every twitch of the Alpha's shoulders and tail. She began moving in an arc, always keeping just enough distance that the Alpha had to turn with her rather than charge straight, just as she'd once led a wounded bull away from a broken fence. The Alpha roared, lunging half a step toward Elena Carter before checking itself, forelegs skidding on fine sand as its head jerked violently from the pain at its neck. Elena Carter dropped her center of gravity, spreading her hands, and murmured a stream of soft earth words that made the Alpha blink once. As the Alpha tilted its head, Elena Carter seized the moment to sidestep, drawing it into a turn that exposed the side of the dusty control unit still blinking red. Corvin, harass it from the far side. No damage, Elena Carter said, her eyes locking onto an exposed patch of casing where a blackened cable stuck out. Corvin Astor shot upward, circling close over the Alpha's head and letting out an amplified shout that made the creature look up at him for a few precious seconds. Elena Carter dove into the opening, sliding on her knees beneath the Alpha's delayed swipe, both hands seizing the control unit and wrenching hard. The unit burst in a shower of sparks, then snapped free from the Alpha's neck in a spray of blackened metal as Elena Carter rolled aside to avoid being crushed. The Alpha staggered a few steps, its roar shifting from crazed fury to a hoarse sound like an exhausted animal. Then its massive body slowly sank to its knees. Elena Carter panted, then slowly rose to her feet, stepping toward the heavily breathing Alpha with empty hands raised where it could see them. The Alpha lifted its head, its red eyes softening into a wary exhaustion that was painfully familiar to Elena Carter from every hurting animal she'd ever tended. She extended her hand, placing it on a clean patch of scales at the Alpha's neck, feeling the powerful heartbeat slowing beneath the thick skin. It's done. It's over, Elena Carter whispered, knowing the Alpha didn't understand the words, yet its breathing steadied in time with her voice. In orbit, the control room fell silent for a few seconds before everyone exhaled together, and Professor Mira Caldwell pointed at the graph where the Alpha's pain indicators plunged into acceptable range. Commander Therion Vale pulled his hand away from the fire control, looking down at the image of Elena Carter on the screen, standing beside an Alpha that no longer roared, but simply panted. Next time, the Council will demand to watch in person, Commander Therion Vale said quietly, almost only for Professor Mira Caldwell to hear. On the ground, Lysandra Cade walked slowly closer, watching Elena Carter's hand on the Alpha's neck, the challenge in her eyes shifting into a grudging kind of respect. All right, Cadet Carter, Lysandra Cade said, her voice less sharp. Perhaps your skill isn't just an accident. Elena Carter only nodded, fatigue washing over her like after a day's harvest, but a different worry rising inside, what others would do with what she had just proven. In the Academy's deepest containment tier, Titanfang opened its eyes in the dark, lifting its head as if hearing an invisible call from far away, where Elena Carter still rested her hand on another Alpha's neck. The sensors around Titanfang's pen flickered, recording a slight heartbeat rise that matched the moment the Alpha on Epsilon 4 sank under Elena Carter's touch. The shuttle carrying the field team back to the Warbeast Taming Academy station rode in heavy silence, broken only by the engines and the tired breathing of warbeasts below the deck. Elena Carter stared at the scorch mark on her glove where the control unit's sparks had licked her, only now feeling the sharp sting. You really are insane, you know that? Nivea Solis said over the comm, her voice echoing faintly in her fluid helm, but her clear eyes were full of gratitude. I just didn't want to see an entire cluster erased because of one button, Elena Carter replied, resting her head against the shuttle wall as exhaustion seeped into her bones. Lysandra Cade said nothing, just peeled off her gloves to reveal scraped fingers, then tossed Elena Carter a short nod. Corvin Astor pretended to sleep, yet his wings twitched every time the image of the Alpha nearly crushing Elena Carter flashed through his mind. When the shuttle docked in the reception bay, medics were already waiting with float gurneys and handheld scanners, ready to catch anyone who dropped. Elena Carter was led straight to the med bay, where a full-body scanner washed blue light over her, displaying bones, muscles, and fresh bruise patterns. No fractures, just minor burns and muscle strain, the station medic concluded, sticking a sensor pain patch to Elena Carter's wrist. Before Elena Carter could leave the examination bed, the medbay door slid open to reveal Professor Mira Caldwell with a data slate already glowing in her hand. Cadet Carter, we need a few more neurological tests, Professor Mira Caldwell said, wasting no time on preamble. Elena Carter sighed but nodded, telling herself that a few brain scanners were nothing compared to standing in front of Titan Fang's jaws. The Academy's neurolab was a circular space lined with screens, a semi-gravity chair surrounded by sensor rings sitting at its center. Elena Carter sat in the chair, feeling gravity ease, and the sensor ring slowly lowered to encircle her head like a metallic crown. We'll simulate the sounds, vibrations, and signals emitted by the Alpha on Epsilon 4, but without any physical danger, Professor Mira Caldwell explained. The room's screens lit up with a virtual model of the Alpha, along with graphs of heart rate, pain state, and brain waves corresponding to every roar, charge, and collapse. Just react naturally, Professor Mira Caldwell said. Tell me when you feel the urge to back away, or to step in. As the virtual Alpha roared, Elena Carter felt her body flinch instinctively, yet another part of her wanted to find a better angle on its neck. The graph on the screen behind her showed two distinct neural hotspots, one for fear response, one for processing motion patterns and body structure. You're afraid, yet you're still calculating, Professor Mira Caldwell murmured, almost to herself. The test dragged on through other simulations, from ordinary war beasts to Titan Fang lying in its pen, making Elena Carter's palms go clammy. When Titan Fang's image appeared, Elena Carter's neural graph spiked, not in the fear centers, but in the linkage recognition zones. You've never even been in the same room as Titan Fang, Professor Mira Caldwell said softly. Yet your brain is reacting as if to a potential bond subject. Elena Carter swallowed. Maybe because I saw it through the glass. But the excuse sounded weak even to her own ears. The test ended, and the sensor ring lifted away, leaving a few strands of Elena Carter's hair sticking up from static. We'll need to repeat this with the real Titan Fang, Professor Mira Caldwell said at last, her voice both eager and anxious. That proposal quickly brought Elena Carter back to the holotable in the conference room, this time not only with Director Kalis Rowan, Commander Therian Vale, and Professor Mira Caldwell, but also three ghostly holograms of counselors. Advisor Lucian Maris sat opposite Elena Carter, fingers interlaced, wearing a thin smile, as if this were the outcome he'd waited for all along. A planetary counselor with translucent bluish skin spoke up. The Alliance requires data on human interaction capability with Titan-class war beasts. Elena Carter felt more like a specimen than a cadet, but she kept silent, eyes fixed on Director Kalis Rowan, as if seeking an anchor. Director Kalis Rowan laced his fingers and spoke slowly. The Academy has a duty to shield its cadets from experiments that exceed acceptable risk. We are not going to kill Cadet Elena Carter, another counselor with pupil-less black eyes said mildly. Only let her stand near Titan Fang. Advisor Lucian Maris interjected. With multi-layered shielding, armed security, and energy controls, the risk remains within acceptable parameters. Commander Therian Vale spoke dryly. In war, we lost entire companies just to stall a single Titan-class specimen. Exactly why, if humans can make them lie down without orbital artillery, Advisor Lucian Maris replied. We must understand it. Finally, a quick vote was taken. Small rings around each counselor's hologram shifted to green one by one, while Director Kalis Rowan's icon remained unlit. The trial is approved, Advisor Lucian Maris concluded, on condition that Commander Therian Vale personally supervises and Professor Mira Caldwell controls all safety systems. Elena Carter heard her heart pounding, but when Director Kalis Rowan looked at her, he simply asked, "Cadet Carter, you have the right to refuse." Elena Carter thought of Titan Fang, of the Alpha in the pit, of entire clusters of war beasts erased if firepower remained the easier option, then answered, "I will do it, if every safety measure is active." Commander Therian Vale nodded once. "I'll be there, between Titan Fang and everyone else." After the meeting, the corridor seemed longer than usual as Elena Carter walked it, to the point she was almost grateful to hear Corvin Astor's footsteps hurrying after her. "They're really going to put you in with Titan Fang," Corvin Astor said, almost whispering, his wings folding tight against his back as if to make himself smaller before the thought. "I agreed," Elena Carter replied, eyes on the light strips along the floor as if they were familiar reins. Lysandra Cade leaned against the wall at the bend in the corridor, clearly waiting, arms crossed. "If they're going to run that trial," Lysandra Cade said, "I'm requesting assignment to the outer security ring." Elena Carter blinked. "You're not afraid of Titan Fang?" Lysandra Cade shrugged. "Of course I'm afraid, but I'm more afraid of not being there when things go wrong." Corvin Astor sighed. "Fine, then give me the upper observation tier. If we all die, at least I'll have a front row seat to a memorable finale." Elena Carter let out a short laugh, then shook her head. "Thanks, to both of you." The night before the trial, the Academy station seemed quieter than usual, but Elena Carter knew it was just the hush of systems that had been triple-checked. In the deepest containment tier, Titan Fang lay coiled, eyes open, tracking the blinking red light of a camera as if it knew something would change tomorrow. Sensors recorded Titan Fang never entering deep sleep throughout the cycle, only settling when the comm system experimentally played a short clip of Elena Carter's voice from training. The next morning, Elena Carter stood before the elevator leading down to containment, wearing field armor upgraded with a thin energy shielding layer. Commander Therian Vale, in heavy tactical armor, stood beside her, helmet tucked under his arm, his gaze calm, but nowhere near relaxed. "This time, there's no Alpha stuck under the floor," Commander Therian Vale said, half reassurance, half warning. "This time, we have Titan Fang," Elena Carter answered, tightening her grip on the neural harness at her hip like a farmer gripping reins before opening a stall. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a bare metal car lined with faint energy fields, wide enough for one person and the shadow of their fear. "We'll monitor from the observation tier," Professor Mira Caldwell's voice came over the comm. "If any metric spikes past threshold, the lift will pull you out immediately." "And if Titan Fang breaks through both containment and the lift?" Elena Carter asked, half joking, half serious. "Then at least you'll be the first to see it." Corvin Astor cut in on a side channel, voice slightly shaky, but still joking. From the observation tier deeper below, Lysandra Cade checked the non-lethal weapons of the security team, eyes never leaving Titan Fang's pen schematic. Titan Fang waited in the darkness of its pen, sensing unusual vibrations through the station's structure as the elevator began lowering the first human Earthborn down toward it. The elevator doors closed in front of Elena Carter, cutting off all outside light, leaving only the countdown on the panel. Containment level, T10, 9, 8. The elevator shuddered as it began to descend, the red indicator light sliding past lower security tiers, while Elena Carter heard her heartbeat blend with the engine hum. On Elena Carter's helmet HUD, her survival indicators stayed stable, but her neural stress gauge ticked upward in tiny increments. Professor Mira Caldwell's voice came through a private channel. "Heart rate within range, Cadet Elena Carter. Don't forget to breathe deep." On the observation tier, Lysandra Cade stood behind reinforced glass, watching the icon labeled Elena Carter slide down the elevator shaft schematic. Beside her, Corvin Astor spread and refolded his wings like a caged bird unable to follow, eyes glued to the screen showing Elena Carter's life signs. In the central control room, Director Kalis Rowan, and Advisor Lucian Maris stood on either side of Commander Therian Vale, all three staring at the same image. Titan Fang's pen map and the elevator's position.
Just breathe,
Containment
Elena.
level. T3, 2, 1. The cool machine voice counted, and Elena Carter tightened her grip on the neural harness like a farmer holding reins before a bull's stall. The elevator came to a soft jolt, and the metal doors slid aside, revealing a dim corridor lit only by the red warning glow around Titan Fang's pen. The air on the containment level smelled of metal, ozone, and heavy warmth, reminding Elena Carter of barns after storms, only thicker and more oppressive. The wall to Elena Carter's right was a slab of transparent armor so thick it turned Titan Fang into a giant shadow in red water, only curves of muscle and scale, like ancient armor showing. Titan Fang lay coiled in the center of its pen, its long body covered in layered black scales that rose and fell like shifting shields with every breath. Titan Fang's head rose slowly, revealing two golden eyes like small suns that locked onto Elena Carter's silhouette in the warning glow. The whole corridor trembled slightly as Titan Fang shifted its weight, and Elena Carter had to brace her stance, even though a safe distance, and the armored glass separated them. Cadet Elena Carter, two-way visual and audio feeds are active. The specimen can see and hear you. Professor Mira Caldwell reported from the observation room. Elena Carter swallowed, then took one step closer to the glass, letting Titan Fang see her face clearly and her unarmed stance. "Titan Fang," Elena Carter said, her voice echoing through the chamber speakers, sounding tiny against the vast space around the creature. Titan Fang answered with a roar so deep that Elena Carter felt her chest vibrate, the sound waves battering the glass like an invisible storm. On the control panel, a cascade of pressure warnings chimed, but Commander Therian Vale merely tilted his head, issuing no order to pull Elena Carter back up. "Remember what you did with the Alpha," Commander Therian Vale's voice sounded in Elena Carter's ear, deep and steady. "Read its body first. Think of commands later." Elena Carter began watching Titan Fang's breathing rhythm, the way the shoulder muscles bunched, the angle of its planted limbs, and the tension in its long, pillar-like tail. Titan Fang didn't charge immediately. It sidestepped, heavy steps controlled, like a bull used to a cramped pen, but still testing for weak spots in the fence. "It's not trying to break the glass," Elena Carter said quietly over the channel. "It's measuring distance, and measuring me." "We're seeing heightened pattern recognition activity in Cadet Elena Carter," Professor Mira Caldwell reported, eyes fixed on the screen. "And in Titan Fang there's a strangely corresponding spike." Advisor Lucian Maris leaned slightly toward the data, the corner of his mouth curling up. "That is exactly what we needed to demonstrate." On the containment level, Titan Fang stopped opposite Elena Carter, lowering its head to the level of the glass, golden eyes narrowing as if focusing on each of her breaths.
Look at this.
Elena Carter suddenly remembered her father's words. "Don't stare straight into an animal's eyes when it's deciding if you're a threat." And she deliberately let her gaze slide down to Titan Fang's neck. She raised one hand, palm open, resting it lightly on the glass as if she could touch Titan Fang's skin beyond. Surface sensors recorded both their temperatures and heartbeats. Titan Fang tilted its head, bringing its snout to the glass and exhaling a dense, hot breath, exactly where Elena Carter's hand rested. In that moment, Elena Carter felt a strange pressure flood her mind, as if someone were forcing in memories that weren't hers. A red-burning sky, orbital fire, the stench of scorched metal. Elena Carter reeled, knees going weak, but she clenched her teeth and kept her hand on the glass so Titan Fang wouldn't mistake it for a retreat. "Neurological load spiking," Professor Mira Caldwell exclaimed. "But the waveform matches Titan Fang's old battlefield pattern." "Cut the link," a counselor shouted over the channel, but Commander Therian Vale raised a hand. "Not yet. Cadet Elena Carter is still within tolerance." In Elena Carter's head, the war images slowed, replaced by a heavy sensation at Titan Fang's neck, where old containment rings had once burned and constricted its flesh. She rasped into the speaker system. "I know how a collar cuts. Titan Fang, it's over. There are no rings now." Titan Fang blinked slowly, its huge head tilting, as if comparing memories of constricting metal rings with the bare feeling of its neck now. Elena Carter lowered her hand from her own neck, then very slowly dipped her head to Titan Fang, not a bow, but the kind of yielding gesture made to a herding animal choosing its escape path. Titan Fang expelled a powerful breath that fogged the glass completely. Then it lowered its head, resting its chin on the cell floor right against the window, level with where Elena Carter stood. On the graphs, Titan Fang's physiological stress plummeted while its neural activity aligned in an eerie harmony with Elena Carter's, like two melodies layered together. "Primary bond with a Titan class?" a technician stammered, and the entire control room sank into stunned silence. On the observation tier, Lysandra Cade loosened her grip on her non-lethal rifle, and Corvin Astor just whispered, "She just told a Titan to lie down." On the containment level, Elena Carter slid her hand down the glass as if resting it on Titan Fang's jawbone beyond, the invisible pressure in her head ebbing away, leaving only deep exhaustion. "Cadet Elena Carter, you may step back," Professor Mira Caldwell's voice sounded, gentler this time. "The initial bond has yielded sufficient data." Elena Carter slowly lifted her hand from the glass, taking one step back, then another, and Titan Fang merely blinked, no roar, no lunge, like a mountain that had decided to rest. The elevator waited at the corridor's end. As Elena Carter turned her back on Titan Fang, she heard a long, heavy sigh from the cell, like a reluctant agreement. The elevator doors closed around Elena Carter, carrying her up from the containment level, while below Titan Fang remained sprawled with its golden eyes half-lidded. When Elena Carter stepped out of the elevator into the safe zone, her legs nearly gave out, and Commander Therian Vale had to grab her shoulder to keep her from collapsing. "I can still stand," Elena Carter tried to joke, her voice hoarse, and Commander Therian Vale replied, "Yes, and Titan Fang is lying down." In the conference room, the counselor's holograms reappeared, this time accompanied by a cascade of charts, footage, and a new annotation. "Human Earthborn, Titan-class interface, undefined." Advisor Lucian Maris didn't bother hiding his satisfaction. Now no one can dispute Cadet Elena Carter's strategic value. Director Kalis Rowan answered coolly, "Strategic value does not equate to turning Cadet Elena Carter into property." A counselor suggested transferring her to a special research program, but Commander Therian Vale cut in. "She remains a cadet of the War Beast Taming Academy until she says otherwise." While they argued, Elena Carter sat on a bench outside the hall, still in armor, head bowed, hands twisted together, feeling like the world was drafting her future without asking. Lysandra Cade arrived first, helmet tucked under her arm, sitting beside her without speaking for several seconds, simply being there. "You just made a Titan obey," Lysandra Cade said at last, her voice no longer mocking. "But if they try to turn you into a weapon, I'll be the first to protest." Corvin Astor showed up next, flopping onto the bench on Elena Carter's other side. "Great. Now we're friends with the Titan Whisperer. Social pressure just doubled." Elena Carter laughed, still shaky. "If they hand me a nickname, I'm making them give all of you one, too." The conference room doors opened, and Director Kalis Rowan emerged with Commander Therian Vale and Professor Mira Caldwell. Advisor Lucian Maris followed, his expression unreadable. Director Kalis Rowan stopped before Elena Carter. "They've added a new line to your file. No battlefield deployment without dual approval from the Academy and the cadet herself." Professor Mira Caldwell added, "And we've named what just happened Titan-Human Empathic Interface, provisionally applied to one individual, Elena Carter." Advisor Lucian Maris gave a thin smile. "Congratulations, Cadet Elena Carter. You've just become a legal precedent and a doctrinal paper at the same time." Elena Carter exhaled, the weight in her chest easing a little. "I'm still a cadet, right?" "Still a cadet," Commander Therian Vale replied. "You just come with an extra set of drills no curriculum has ever written." As everyone dispersed, Elena Carter turned to gaze through a distant observation window, toward the decks far below, where, beneath hundreds of compartments and armor layers, Titan Fang still lay. She heard nothing, Yet in Elena Carter's mind, there lingered a vague sensation, like Titanfang's slow heartbeat answering her own from very far away. Elena Carter opened her eyes, a thin smile forming as she thought that 3 years at the War Beast Taming Academy would be far longer than expected. But at least she wasn't the only one afraid in the pen anymore.